Hi guys, Goinggreenmom here. I had some questions about beef and how this process works last week, so I thought I'd try and walk you through it a little bit. Keep in mind, this is not a long-term habit that I have had. I have not been able to do this for a whole lot of times. I've done this twice where I'm currently doing it. And then when the kids were little and I was still with their dad, we actually got beef this way from a different family member and a different processor several times then as well. So typically you're buying the meat from the farmer and picking it up from the processor. It will typically involve both money going to the farmer for the meat and the processor for the butchering and cutting it up. The process starts with something called a cut list. I guess technically it starts with them scheduling the animals to get butchered. And then sometime between when it gets scheduled and when you're going to have it processed, you need to get the butcher a cut list. A cut list basically is their instructions. How do you want that packaged? Do you want your ground beef in 1 pound or 2 pound packages? Do you want 3 steaks per package, 4 steaks per package, 2 steaks per package? Do you want those thick cut or thin cut steaks? That's about the extent of my knowledge on steak, y'all. I don't know how to cook it. I don't know how. But I mean, it will also be like, do you want a 2 pound roast or a 5 pound roast? Some of that, you just need to kind of know what your family will use and how you're going to be cooking it. If a 5 pound roast won't fit in your Dutch oven or your Instant Pot or however it is that you cook roasts, then you would want to order a smaller roast, say a 2 pound roast. If you are typically going to use, say, a pound of ground beef in a meal, but you know that you always cook double so you have something in the freezer to use later, you might want to get 2 pound packages of ground beef instead of 1 pound. It does typically help to have some clue what part of the animal different cuts of meat come from or what a different cut of meat is. Some of them aren't available in stores on a regular basis. Others you might know and love, and that's great. To some degree, this might change slightly between different processors as well. For instance, you guys know that I had been using stew meat from Aldi's to make my beef and broccoli. Well, the processor that we are using doesn't have stew meat on their cut list, but they have boiling beef. So my question to them was, well, what is boiling beef? And what it turns out, they use the brisket part of the meat, which is sort of like under the neck between the front legs. And their boiling beef is basically that brisket sliced into about 1-inch slices so that when you boil it up or whatever, it releases all the fat and stuff into your liquid and it will make a good soup or that kind of thing. Not necessarily great for what I was using the stew meat for. At the same time, I have a friend whose other half likes to smoke things. So this time I got actual brisket with the hope that I will be able to barter part of that brisket for his smoking it. But then, my daughter found out she really likes skirt steak, and that works really well for stir fries and that sort of thing. But one thing that is a great disappointment for her is that there's only 2 skirt steaks per animal, so you don't get a lot of that, whereas like you might get, 6 or 12 T-bone steaks. Keep in mind, I said I don't know much of anything about steak. So please don't like totally skewer me for that if that's incorrect. I just know that, you know, you're limited to the amount that you're buying. So if you're buying a half an animal, you're going to have both front half and back half. But it's only going to be like one side. So for instance, on each side of the animal, there's a skirt steak. If I bought a whole animal, I could get 2 skirt steak. I only bought a half, so I'm only going to get 1 skirt steak. Some processors, if you're ordering a quarter, you're going to get all a front quarter or all of a back quarter and not the other cuts. The 2 processors we have used typically try to kind of have it balanced. You can get front and back, but they're going to split it between whoever bought the other part of that animal. So like if you guys both want steaks, you might only get half the steak that half would produce because the other person wanted it. You're not going to be able to say, I want 6 steaks and 15 roasts or something. It's sort of like they're going to cut it to be the most efficient way they can and then package it accordingly, and it will get sorted between the people that bought that animal. I know like one thing that this processor requests is that say you do split an animal between multiple people, they like it if like everybody has the same weight of ground beef packages. That way they can take all of the ground beef and it's just a more efficient process. They don't have to change weights in the middle and that kind of thing. It is typically labeled as not for sale because the processor is not the one selling it. If I recall correctly, that has to do with various regulations and stuff. You're buying it from the farmer, so you'll be paying the farmer for the meat, and then you pay processing, which is calculated on the hanging weight of the animal, and that's paid to the processor. And as far as pricing, it really kind of depends on who you're working with. They need to be able to pay for all of the feed that it took to raise that animal. Depending on if they have a breeding program, it may also include the price of the animal if they had to buy it as a calf. So I bought a half and processing was $226 or so. And I believe it was about 470 pounds of meat total. And that will vary depending on the processor. And like I said, I've done this with 2 different processors, and the one was more than a decade ago, so I don't remember those costs.